All right, we're being recorded now. So thank you, everyone. I do want to say that we're going to follow the agenda. The first topic that we're going to go through is going to be around access. So I know that there are several people here that's their only point of interest. If that is true for you, please feel free after we're done talking about access. And if you've got any questions, you share those. Have the rest of the time to you. So you're more than happy to, welcome to sign off. Again, chat the questions. Sarah's going to be monitoring that. And I am going to share my screen in just a moment. The resources, the agenda, and the PowerPoint, as well as the recorded meeting, will be on a page that I'll send out the link to everyone when we're done. So it will be on the Office of Assessment Administration website. So I'm going to share my screen right now, and we're going to jump in. If you do have questions, please, as I said, use the chat. There will be time when at the end that I will be essentially hanging out, and Sarah and I can answer any questions. So we're going to get going. Welcome, everyone. It's really hard to do this in a virtual environment, as you well know, but we really want to make sure that we're connected, to make sure that if you have questions, that there are people who've done this before, that there are ideas that work, and if you've got new ideas, we're glad to listen and hear them. So the agenda for today is we're going to talk about the changes in access. We're going to spend a little time talking about FastBridge screening and then the interim assessments, ANet. There are a couple changes in the Wisconsin Forward exam as of today, and so we'll take a look at those changes. We'll take a look at also the changes that are occurring in DLM. And finally, for grade 2 COGAT coming up. As you can see, the theme of the day is changes. So we'll finish up with other questions, et cetera, specifically involving opting out, et cetera. Before we dig into specific assessments, I want to give you what's current, what's going on in the world around us as far as assessments at the state level. So here's what we know. That the current legislation, if you've heard about the state legislature and the governor working back and forth on a COVID package, included in the governor's proposal is a specific section on assessments for K-12 schools. And what it says is that in this current school year, this academic year of 2021, that the Forward, the ACT, the Aspire, trying to remember if there's any of those big assessments would not be given. And school report cards would not be issued. One of the things that they have said or did not say in the legislation is that access testing is a federal mandate. So we kind of have to wait for that. So this again covers Forward, dynamic learning maps, and state report cards. This is the elementary focus. So we're going to have to wait and see whether or not access can be given, and if so, if there's a federal waiver from that. So there's a lot of questions about access. That's if this legislation moves forward and is in fact passed with the current language in it. Okay, now let's move to the updates. For access, typically we would be just about maybe a third of the way through, and many of you would actually be done with a good portion of access testing if this was a typical year. DPI has pushed the window back, so now the test window for access opens on February 22nd. And it extends all the way through April 30th. The big reason for this is that WIDA is not, I repeat, is not offering a virtual version of Access. It still remains an in-person assessment, even though we use the computer. It's an in-person assessment. So also some of the things that play into this, as we always have, is during the winter break. Typically we have a break in the assessment. We also have a break in the assessment for our spring break. So even though we've got February, we've got a couple weeks in February, or 1 week, full week in February, and we have about 3 weeks in March. Then when we get back, there will be approximately 3.5 weeks for the closure until the window closes. So far, we will continue to do remote screener for new students, and we'll continue to identify students through the assessment window, the access window. And otherwise, everything is on track. So we are going to continue to look at dates for planning. So the current dates that are out there from DPI, and they fully realize that we are virtual and that this thing may not actually happen, but I don't want to be the district that has to scramble at the end. So here are the dates for Access. January 20th, DPI will pull the student rosters and upload those to DRC. So any student that enrolls after the 20th of January, we are going to have to enroll them individually, add them to the roster. This is pretty typical. That happens every year. There is a state date that is pulled, and then after that we add students. Beginning January 29th, we will be adding the accommodations for students that are in the current IEP. So as of the 29th, we will begin taking a look at those accommodations, adding them to what's in AMS at that time. There's a couple other dates of things happening after that. And then we have the printed material arriving in your buildings if you should need that. And most of you, I think, will have some printed material. So the writing booklets, and then, yes, printed materials, including kindergarten, if appropriate, will arrive February 17th, and then the window opens the following week on the 22nd. So I am going to take a moment and stop sharing and just see if there are any questions that need to be addressed.
Nothing in the chat.
Verify, Tim, the plan is tentative, correct? For Access, that's if we are in fact in person?
Yes, because there is no plan from the vendor, no ability to give the test, give access in a virtual environment. So if we are hybrid, if there's any face-to-face time at all, then we will be expected to give access tests to our ELs.
Thank you. That's what I heard. And then just to make sure I heard the correct information for Forward, Forward has been verified and the only legislation we're waiting for is the Access, right?
No.
Okay.
So Forward and DLM are in the process at the state. So when you hear that the state has passed a new COVID relief bill, expect that to be part of the language that's in that new bill. So if and when that does happen, I will be getting that out absolutely immediately to everyone because it has a huge impact on what we do as schools.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can I ask Tim,
Yep.
in the past with the printed materials, is February 17th the time when the printed materials would arrive to you, or is that when they would arrive to the schools?
Sarah, you want to jump in?
Yeah, that following typical timelines for DPI, I would say that would be the day that we would receive it. So then it would be we'll get it out to you as soon as we can. And Tim, we have does that answer your question, Patty? Okay. Tim, we have a question from the chat. What if EL students do not opt to come back in person?
If we are not face-to-face with our students, we cannot give them access. So if they choose to stay at home and continue virtual learning, then they would not be able to take the access assessment. So we would have to, typically we have to account for all our students as to why they did not test. So we'll have to take a look at the reasons and see which fits best for that. Hopefully they'll have added a reason such as they didn't build a test to give virtually, something like that. So the bottom line is we need to account for all students. Yes, I'm sorry, Anna. DRC is Data Recognition Corporation. They are the vendor for both Access and WIDA Screener, as well as the forward test. So DRC is that vendor. So we will have to account for all students, whether or not they are in attendance personally or not. Rihanna?
We have some EL students in the CARES program currently. Does that count as in person?
I would say yes.
So then our EL teacher would be expected to go to the CARES site to administer this?
We will have to work through what that means. If we are not open at that point, then I would say that's not something I'm willing to do. So it's going to be, if we are hybrid or if we're open, then yes, we would do something along those lines. If the care sites were still open and how that all worked, that's part of the puzzle that we have yet to take a look at. But if they're the only sites that are open, I would say no, because we will not be doing that. Any other questions regarding?
Yeah, I got a question. Is it possible that we start the window and we start, like, especially lower elementary, right? Like my school's K2. So if we're going to be first to go back and we start this, are you saying that it's possible sometime in that window, the opening in April, there can be a decision made from the federal sort of point of view saying, no, you don't have to do it. So then we have done all this work for, a percentage of the kids for nothing?
I would say the data is still going to be useful. Data is still going to be useful for where are the students moving, et cetera. The big piece with the federal legislation or the federal waivers would be for accountability. Both from they are holding the state accountable and the state then holds us accountable. So if we look at it as this is a tool that helps us in figuring out where students are at, then to me, it still is something as long as we use the data. But if it's solely used for federal accountability, we have to do the best that we can. So that may not answer your question, but that's the best I got for you right now.
Okay.
Thanks, Benji. Okay. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And we will move to the next assessment, which would be the screeners for FastBridge. So because we've got so much going on, one of the things that I would like to do is in ensuring that you and your building, your teachers, your students and families get as much support as possible, that there's the least amount of confusion, that everything is straightforward. I need to know a couple things. So on January 4th, I'm going to send you 2 questions. First question is, when are you and your building planning on giving the screener? And this would be for each specific grade. Get that to me as soon as you can. I know that January 4th, you may or may not know exactly what you're going to do, but as soon as you do, please let me know, because that allows us to make sure that we are supporting you in a very timely manner, that you get the kinds of support that you need. And then if there are some specific things that you need, if you include that in the January 4th survey, whenever you return it, and if you return it a couple times, you know what support you need, and then later on you give me the dates. January 4th would let me know what you need so I can make sure I can build that for you, make sure that we get that to you. So it'll be a short survey coming to you, 2 questions. When are you planning on giving the screener, and what supports do you need? The window does, yes.
Oh, sorry, Tim. We got a few of the same question coming through in the chat, and they're wondering if the FastBridge survey is the same one that was recently received from coaches that Marissa Flowers sent out.
No. So if it, again, the difference would be I'm asking just when are you planning on giving this? That's the big piece. I know Marissa has sent out a survey talking about asking what support you need. So I don't want to duplicate things. So I want to make sure that we know when you're planning on giving it so that we can put resources in place to help you. So does that help? Okay. The window opens on January 11th. All right, here we go. Now, some of the things that have changed since last time. So this happened right after we closed the window last fall. We were finally able to get ClassLink working with FastBridge. So what that means is that students can only log in using ClassLink. There's not an option for students to go to the website. So the only option for students is through ClassLink. There will be a FastBridge button. It should be in the assessment folder. If it's not there already, it will be. The other thing that this change means, is that a classroom teacher, someone who has the classroom user permission set, must also go through ClassLink. They cannot go through the website for logging in. The only staff members who use the FastBridge website for logging in will in fact be those with specialist credentials, permission sets. So if you are able to typically CC teachers, BRTs, instructional coaches, PSTs, there's a whole list of people who need to see more than one grade. So you might look at the whole entire school. If you are a specialist permission, and you also would know that because your login is using your B number, then you go through the website. If you log in using, in the past, if you log in using your email address, then you simply click the button on ClassLink.
And just for clarification, I wanted to add in there that for the ClassLink users, for students and for staff, this does override the need for a username and password. So it'll just be a single click. They're actually automatically generated. If you were to look the old style and look at the student's username and password, you'd be like, oh my gosh, it's too long. But that's because it's creating that link with ClassLink, and you actually don't need to type in those username and passwords any longer.
Right, so that should take once everybody's used to that, that should take a huge load off of the login process, because I know you hate to give an assessment of any sort and have the first experience being one of frustration logging in. So, all right, I see a few things popping up on the chat. So
one thing that came through on chat that I want to make a little clarification on. So the classroom users, teachers generally, those accounts are made through IC. So if you have a connection to a student within Infinite Campus, you automatically have a classroom user account. And so it is possible that you could log in both ways, but if you're logging through with ClassLink, you're getting a more limited view because it's limiting you to who you're attached to in Infinite Campus. whereas the specialist account does not look at your attachments within IC. So it is possible that a single user could log in both ways, but they're actually looking at two different accounts. Just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you, Sarah. And there's also the fact that classroom users, we can put together, for instance, a grade level team. We can make sure that they are able to see each other's students. If you're working with a third grade classroom or third grade team, we can ensure that they're able to see others, other data without giving them specialist permissions.
So a couple other things in the chat before we move on.
Okay.
One question was, so even though we changed passwords to something different in the fall, students can still access through ClassLink? And the answer would be yes, because this change has taken place since then. So it actually has overridden all of that hard work that we put in the fall. I mean, thank you guys for doing all of that. I know it was not an easy task, but right now it will have overridden whatever you put into it in the fall. And another question is, so if there was a mistake in entering the username and password from the first round that saved in ClassLink, will this new sync with IC override that?
And my understanding with talking with tech services is yes, it will. It's almost like wiping the slate clean. It is based on the student's actual information from IC versus what a person types in on their own. We have Gompers Elementary is actually trying this out beginning tomorrow. So if there are any questions or concerns, things like that show up, we will be on it to ensure that it's corrected by the time January 11th rolls around.
Here's some more good questions for you, Tim.
Yep.
And they're both related. So could a student access so a student could access the test at any time during that window since they just click in ClassLink? And another question that's related, can students get into the link at any time then, or do specialists need to add the dates, set the dates?
So students can get into the assessment at any time. So you can set up a window and say, we're going to be testing on Thursday. And it could potentially be, if a student has gone in to take the assessment ahead of time, one of the things that happens is if they've completed everything, it will not show up. It will not allow them to select that screener. So if they're completed a screener within the window, they're done. So that would be kind of a way of figuring out who's actually gone in, but students can go in at any time through ClassLink and click on that. What else? What other questions do we have?
Tim, there were problems before with students logging in, then it would say no test available. Do you know if those problems have been fixed now that we're going through, they're logging in through a different way?
So again, a couple of things that happen. If there's no test available, one of the first things that would come to my mind, it would be, have they already completed it? If they've already completed it, then it would not be a test that's available. Otherwise, you'd have to connect with either Sarah or myself, and we will dig into it again. One of the things that we found is that FastBridge now, their turnaround time for support is much quicker than it was in the fall. Other than that, I don't know of any other reasons why we would see that, and hopefully we won't have too much of that. But again, please let us know right away if you do end up with something like that.
Can I ask, so we found that a lot in the fall, and if we had students log back out and log back in, then it would start to work. And sometimes they had to do it up to like 4 or 5 times. But if we had them log in and log out, eventually their tests would show up. Is that possible now if it's single user sign on? Like, will they be able to log in and log out?
Yes, they should be able to. One of the questions, or one of the concerns, I guess, that comes out of that is that what about the connectivity that the students were having? So if they were intermittently connecting, that could have been one of the reasons why it was giving them no test, and that they would need to log in and out several times. So bottom line is, yes, if they click on the icon in class link, it should log them in automatically. If they get a message that it doesn't, they would close that, log back in, and click on the class link icon again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Tim, I got a few more here.
Sure.
First of all, we got verification from Matt at Gompers that they had tested a couple of students yesterday, logged in automatically with no issues. So far, so good. Hopefully that'll continue.
Awesome.
There was a question about when the FastBridge window closes, which is February 5th. That was answered by another person in the chat. Question, is there more training needed for staff for the second testing window, which I don't believe there is, right, Tim?
Boy, great question. And I believe that there is one change in which assessment is being given, and I believe that is in the DLI.
First grade DLI.
Yes. And so there's only one component of the assessment that is changing. And so, yes, you would need to go back in and do that particular professional development.
Another question is, which subtests are being taken by each grade? I've seen conflicting information in different documents. No need to address this if it's still coming.
We'll send that out and also post that on the website. So make sure that we are consistent across all messages. So thank you.
Do testing coordinators need to set the tests that students will be taking again? For example, at kindergarten, there were many literacy assessments, but we were only giving 1 or 2 of them. And then extension of that question, will there be a warm up again this time?
Let me take the first question, and we are going to be sharing out, I know David Goss in Student Services created a video of how to limit the number of icons, test icons, that appear on a student's screen. I'm going to re-share that with you. So that happens at the building level. So you, as a specialist, could go in and change the setup so that the students only see the test icon that they will be using. So yes, at the younger grades, when it had a whole bunch of different subtests, you will see only those that you will actually be testing. Now, the warm-up should still be there. And if I recall correctly, there might be on that image, it's kind of a grid, and there are several different boxes. Only those that you are taking will be clickable. So we'll double check and make sure that that's all in working order before we get too much further. So I'm making a note of that, and we'll take care of that.
Okay, there's another question. I can answer this one. Can you share the slides? Tim is going to post the video and the slides to our website. And I believe you said, Tim, you would share that out probably in the same email as this video, right?
Yep, it's already posted there, but I will send everybody a link. So.
Did the screen size problem get fixed from the fall? The buttons for auto reading were almost off the screen, making it difficult for kids to push buttons without leaving the test.
So that has to do with the screen resolution and the way the Chromebook is set up. And so we do have a solution for that. And I'll get you, it's a series of keystrokes. So it's like a Control Alt 0. And it resets it to the typical size of the screen that the Chromebook should be set at. This is not necessarily something that a student does or a parent does. Some software resets the size of the screen. And so this keystroke will take us back to the original settings, which is what FastBridge is designed for.
Okay, another question is a lingering question about the surveys for FastBridge. You wanted to know when grade levels are giving the FastBridge a specific day or week. Is this something the building IRT would tell you?
It's whoever is coordinating the assessment at the specific school. So whether if it's in some cases it's a principal who's coordinating at the school. Other cases it's somebody who is who has been assigned as the coordinator, and so I will make sure that they get that. So somebody at the school should be telling us, saying, okay, in our third grade is going to be doing A math this particular in this window. So just again, so we know how to provide you with the best support as we can.
A few more questions. In regards to the limiting video, I've seen the video and I did go in and change that, but auto reading is as a whole. Is there a way to indicate the individual subtests in auto reading?
I will double check on that. I was thinking, as I was talking about that, I was thinking that, trying to visualize that in my mind, and I will check on that to see if there is a way we can limit what's there.
Last time students could click on other tests, so this is a new change. It's not new, but it did require an extra step. Is that correct, Tim?
Right, that's correct.
Okay. I think I got everybody's question. If I missed somebody, please pipe in.
Okay. And I'm going to, in looking at time, I want to make sure that we have time to cover everything. So I am going to move us forward. Look at this. So some of the things that we learned was to limit the number of icons that are available for students to select. And again, I will double check on the auto reading piece. So there is an icon for auto reading here, but those of you who have not seen it, it goes even further. So there are multiple subtests within auto reading. One of the things that also came up was that just share with adults that this is not an assignment, but rather an assessment, and that there is a difference. So again, we had several people who said the parents apologized that they helped their student, but they thought it was an assignment. So clarity around that will also help. You will be getting updated communication, updated letters that will be sent to you. It'll be on the website. And again, trying to ensure that families know how to support their students and just providing the support that the families need as well.
One last quick FastBridge thing, Tim.
Yep.
And I think I can answer this one. So will we be using different tests if we are in person or virtual? We have seen documents that mention CBM as the test in person within FastBridge. And I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, since this window opens on January 11th and closes on February 5th, we would be treating the middle of the year administration of FastBridge as virtual. And that question would be more in play in the spring. Is that right?
Right, but this year, because we're going to be doing at least 2 of the 3 as virtual, we don't know about the spring yet. If we are back in person in the spring, or if we're still virtual in the spring, we will continue to do auto reading for English at the younger grades, just for consistency, so that when we're taking a look at where students are at, it's not a completely new assessment. So those things that we are doing, for instance, the CBM reading with the DLI students, we would continue to do that. But the auto reading is going to be continued throughout this academic year.
And do we have time for one more FastBridge question? I know
we have time. We need to answer the questions.
Cool. So what about ELs as it pertains to FastBridge? We had many EL families that wanted their child to take the assessment despite not being qualified.
Again, we're going to use the same processes for saying these are the students that should be taking it and who should be exempted. The 3.0 on the oral reading subtest from Access in the past, I believe was the determinant for this. And I will clarify with my friends in OMGE that nothing has changed as far as what we're doing with our students this year. So I will also share that with you. But at this point, I have not heard any changes in determining who should and who should not take the assessment. Okay. So FastBridge is a screener. The ANet ELA Interim will be after this. So again, the window for interim assessments, how are we doing compared to the standards, opens after the window for the screeners closes. ANet opens on the 15th of February and closes on the 26th. So the expectation is that that all schools will be doing ANet Interim at the end of the year, and we are sincerely hoping that your school will be doing them in the middle of the year. While it's optional, I know that many the data that's coming from it, it's now showing up to be very useful data. So while it's optional, it's encouraged. At this point, as of today, the use of ClassLink is being worked out. I'm meeting with the ANet team next week on Tuesday, and we are finalizing the use of ClassLink so students will not have to put in a username and password. I will email everyone and let you know when this happens. So again, one of the issues with ANet was that we had, even if you had a button in ClassLink, you still had to put in your username and password, and that caused issues. So we're going to try and bypass this so that it actually is a single sign-on, just like FastBridge is. And so that is in the works and should be ready even by the time we come back from winter break. So I see there are some questions potentially.
Nothing in the chat.
Okay. All right, then I'm going to continue moving on. So Wisconsin forward exam, some updates for this year. Long range, I know we're looking out further than we typically do this time of year, but once again, it is not going to be something that can be done virtually. The forward exam can only be done in person. The vendor and the state have said that this is not a possibility. However, taking that into consideration, the windows for the test have been changed. The forward test opens, the window opens on March 22nd and closes on May 14th. So that's an additional 2 weeks. Keeping in mind that we have our spring break in there, it would be 1 week before spring break, and then roughly 6 weeks after spring break that we have in order to do the forward exam. Again, we are following the same protocol and process that is typically in place for a typical year for the forward exam. And that would mean accommodations and supports are uploaded in February. So once again, if IEPs need to be adjusted, keep that in mind. We'll get specific dates out to everyone as we get them in ourselves. So I see a lot of things going on in the chat. Anything there for me, Sarah?
We just had a question around which grades take forward. So as a reminder, grades 3 and 5 take ELA and math, and then grade 4 takes ELA, math, science, and social studies.
Right. Thanks. Now, here's another part of what the state has done to shorten up and take the burden off of the forward exam. So here's update part 2. Only during this particular year, 2021, for that testing, they will not, I repeat, they will not be having a text-dependent analysis section in the ELA test. Normally, we have 4 sessions, The first one being the text-dependent analysis, so reading the text, comparing, and then writing. That will not be included for 2021. Also, there will not be any field test items in any of the test content. So ELA, math, science, social studies, there will not be any field test items. Typically, there are maybe 3 to 5 questions in the entire math section that would be, they're testing these items out, and they are not actually included in the score. This is very typical for any standardized assessment. That happens in each and every one of the content areas, but they have chosen this year to remove those, so it should shorten all of the sections of the test, and then removing a section will reduce the time for the test by approximately an hour in each grade. So it should shorten things up quite a bit. We'll get more information about this as we move ahead. Just please note that this is only for the 2021 testing season. All those things will be back. They're currently scheduled to be back in 2022. So text-dependent analysis will be back. Field test items will be back. So that's what I've got for forward update. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Nothing in the chat for that either.
Okay. Now, we're trying to make these things, those of you who've been through the forward test know that these are the tickets that go with that. And we're working to make sure that the vendor and ClassLink are on the same page, and that you will not have to cut up all these tickets. And I know that probably for some of you go, oh, I don't want to see that. And I get it. So we're working hard to make sure that you do not have to use tickets, that ClassLink should be able to work. But again, that's far out. And I'm working with the vendor even now on this. I've got information into them and waiting to hear back. So, all right. Dynamic learning maps. Okay, I'll wait just a second while we have potentially another question.
One question we have is, sorry if I missed this earlier, but is something similar in the works for access for test tickets?
That's a great question. And since it's the same vendor, it should be kind of like 2 birds with 1 stone. So I will check. Thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that. At this point, there is not a ClassLink option, but we will work on that and move fast. So thank you. Dynamic learning maps is for those students who have alternate assessments. So students have an IEP, but they're not being held accountable to the Wisconsin State standards. So this is just a small percentage of our population. The spring window for DLM opens on March 22nd and closes May 14th. You will notice that this is the same window as the forward test. However, dynamic learning maps is not just for grades 3 through 8. It includes all students who have a test in a state mandated test in their grade level. So even though it's not important to you, 9th graders, 10th graders, and 11th graders will also be potentially taking the dynamic learning maps. As we get details, we tend to email those out to specific staff that are identified as being the person who is in the best position to help support a student through the dynamic learning map test. And then the same process that we've had in the past, which is called first contact and personal needs profile completion, will be taking place then. So again, it typically follows the same window as the forward assessment as far as the preparation work. And so we'll be following that. But I just wanted to let you know that there is a change in the window for DLM. I'm just about done. And so I'm going to go through this just a moment, and then I'll open it up for questions. So keep in mind, this has been our policy for several years now, that opt-outs need to be made in a written request to the principal or to you, and then moved on to the principal. And in either case, the written request could be a handwritten note, it could be an email, they're just fine. They need to be forwarded to either Sarah or myself. We are charged with keeping track of that. And so I need to account for that, not only to the state, but also to our Board of Education. So next time we're going to meet again, I'm going to post something in January when we have a little bit more knowledge about what's going to go on. If, after the 8th of January, we should know a little bit more. And all of our assessments that we've talked about today, there's a huge difference if we're virtual or if we're face-to-face. And so we need to make sure that we're up to that. If there are changes that are just really short, I might just post a video. I don't want to take more of your time than is necessary, but I also want to provide opportunities for questions, concerns, etc. I know that we just had something about an opt-out for ANet. So I see the other question about opting out. So typically, what happens with an opt-out is the opt-out is good for the entire year. So if family adult caregiver says, I don't want Tim to be taking FastBridge, that means typically that will be for the entire year. You can certainly ask again. You could certainly say, here's what we've been using this for. Just want to put it back out there, but there's no pressure to test the student if the parents have, the family has opted the student out. Is ANet something that can be opted out of? Again, according to what past practice, that is a possibility to opt out of the ANet assessment as well. Same protocol. You need to put it in writing and send that on to Sarah and myself. We would encourage that everyone, as we learn more and gather more data about how these assessments are working, I would encourage everyone to be involved in all of the assessments. But I also recognize that that's not necessarily how families feel. So what else do we have in the chat there? I missed a couple. So
we have another question about does an opt-out request apply to multiple assessments, for example, FastBridge and Forward, or does it need to be specific to each assessment?
In the past, and I'm going to continue to follow the same protocol, I've gotten notes saying, please opt my child out of all standardized testing. I need to see what it is that they mean, because I don't understand necessarily what the intent of that particular note is. So they would need to say out of Forward and FastBridge and ANet. So they would definitely need to list those specifically that they are concerned about. I'm sorry, what else? Oh,
another
Patty.
Question, could we have a one-pager with all of this info, I'm assuming on opt-outs, in bulleted statements?
Sure. Yes. However, this is because we're not encouraging families to do this. I don't want it sent out to people. Again, once it leaves my hand electronically, I don't have control over it. So I will share with you what the expectation is and some of the information about opting out. Yes. And then Patty, you had a question that you said opting out as far, yeah, I'll get to you, Ashley, thank you. Access is the one exception. Access does not allow families to opt out. We cannot opt them out. So they can refuse to take the test. And in fact, that's what is listed in the choices that we have when we go back and say, Tim did not take the access. Why? refusal. So, or declined, I think is the language that the state uses. So families can just say, my child is not taking access, and we will honor that. But just to keep in mind that there is no real opt-out for that, unlike all the other assessments. Ashley, thank you for being patient.
Well, thank you. And I can wait till the end of this if this isn't as relevant to everyone. But in our last race and equity PD, one of the big reasons our staff said like we're not further in the dismantling phase is because of our use and giving of standardized tests. They like ANet, they like a data culture, but they said like standardized tests are racist and the state exam would be like perpetuating that. And I'm only asking that. I don't know then what to say when I'm on a Zoom call with 40 people and that's what's said. And I don't know if other teachers are feeling this way or IRTs have these questions asked, but I think it's different with a screener or ANet. I don't know what to say about this.
No, I appreciate that because it's been a concern of mine for a long time. And I continue to work and push on vendors and I look into each one of the assessments that we give and say, what is their statement about bias? Because we know that's true. So the whole concept of standardized tests is something that is an issue. I can't tell you not to give the state assessments. In fact, we have to, okay? However, if it's something we have to do, let's make it as close to anti-racist as we possibly can. So I've been working with vendors on specifically telling us what they are doing. And there are pieces that they can do as far as research on the items that they put in their assessments. Also, this just came up in a meeting I was at about who are the norming groups for each of the assessments. I mean, if you give, Patty, you know, and as well as I, if I were to give a Spanish language test, and this is one of the issues why we did not give Spanish MAP tests. Initially, they were normed against English-speaking students. Doesn't make any sense. So we're looking in, and I will be posting on each assessment's website, within OAA, a statement about the norms and who was the group that we looked at or that the vendor looked at when they normed this. For instance, I was just looking at a reading, and they broke down the size of the population and the demographic makeup, the racial makeup of who was in that norming group. So I will share that on the website with everyone. There is a lot of work that we need to do to ensure that our assessments are anti-racist. And I will not tell you that there are not problems.
Sure.
I recognize that, appreciate that, and if you have ideas, if your staff have ideas, I am open to those, and I would love to have a conversation. And again, I am not going to defend assessments that are in any way, shape, or form racist.
I appreciate the tone you said, Tim, where it feels like okay to actually ask this, because in some settings I might. So I appreciate that. And then lastly, you don't have to answer it here, but when you say we have to take it, I'm newer to this. It's because funding is tied to it. That's the main reason we have to take it, right? So then like what I say to staff, something like we need to change things at like the legislative, like different places, but we have to accept it here. And is that the best messaging to teachers?
Well, it's probably the least satisfying.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't satisfy me. You have to take it. Otherwise, we're going to take your money away. And in the history of state tests in this state, there have been schools or districts that have said, you know what, we're not going to take this. And they have been literally pulled aside, and that was the threat, that they will not see state funding or federal funding. So there are two pots of money that come in to fund the school district. federal dollars come in and under title programs, and those require certain assessments. We cannot afford to give up title funding. So
Okay.
we have to do, for instance, we have to assess reading in 3rd, 5th, 6th, 7th grades per federal law. For state law, we have to assess multiple, that was reading and math in those grades. State law says we have to assess in 4th grade, 8th grade, and 10th grade, and it gives a multitude of subjects. That's when we say we have to assess, that's what I mean. It is written into law, and the funding is tied to that. Again, I've never seen a district that has had its funding pulled, but I've never seen a district not do the assessments.
Okay, thank you.
And I am absolutely open to this conversation because this is important information, and there's things that I can change and there are many things that I can't. So please understand that.
Yeah, no, thank you for taking the time. Like I said, I want to actually build a stronger assessment culture at our school where we're looking at what reading skills kids have. I want to use data more. There's something about the state standardized tests that I think is the big one in teachers' minds. So thank you for speaking to that. And
it's also been something that we have never as a district really fully embraced. So the whole concept of being standards aligned and holding ourselves accountable to something that is, assessed like that is also kind of nerve wracking, I would say. So yeah, it causes stress to the system. So we've got a couple things going on. We've got the anti-racist piece, and we've also got this, kind of a shift to saying, where are we with the standards? So there's a lot of things going on. And then, oh yeah, we have a pandemic. Yeah. So I get it. So I appreciate everything that's going on and that all you've done. I don't know, Sarah, there were
Yeah, I know we're running late on time. I'm sorry. But we said at the beginning we were going to talk about COGAT, and I think that slide may have gotten left.
Yes,
so
I'm sorry.
You want to address that briefly?
Yes, thank you. Every year we have been doing COGAT in grade 2. Last year was the first year that we did an online version. We are expecting to do an online version again in grade 2 this year. Remember, COGAT is a screener. It takes approximately an hour. We're looking at the month of February. So roughly, haven't the 2nd through the 26th, I believe, is kind of where we've been ballparking it. Late January is when we will have professional development modules set up for staff who are going to be asked to do this. We'll also be sending information out to families because, again, given our current setting, my guess is that we will still be virtual, at least to some extent. If we are hybrid at that point, we're going to have to pivot pretty quickly, and it still is a computer-based assessment, but it might look different. So thank you, Sharon. I appreciate the reminder. And thank you, Sarah. So that's COGAT is coming. It is something that we do. It is also the screener. So other questions, other items?
I think there was one more question that I missed earlier about, can a letter from the district be created for families who are exempted ELs from the test? And I'm sorry, Leah, I'm not sure which test, if we're talking about Forward or FastBridge or.
Sorry, FastBridge.
Yeah.
FastBridge.
I will work with our friends in OMGE to see what we can do. Again, yes. The bottom line is yes, we'll come up with some consistent language to share with everybody. So that if you do find yourself in that situation, you can say, well, here's what the district is saying. So yes, the window for COGAT is February 2 through the 26th. And that is where we're looking tentatively. Again, we may have to pivot, but know that that's coming. Okay. As always, Sarah and I are available. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Quickest way, obviously, is email. If you have a phone call, you can certainly make that. I will again share my phone number so that you can get a hold of me directly. 608-566-5490, and I will put that in the chat. So 608-566-5490.
Thanks,
So,
Jim. Thanks,
yes.
Sarah.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Have a nice break.
Well, and you too. I wish everybody health and happiness in the new year, and I hope to not see you in Zoom land soon. I'd rather see you in person. So take care, everyone.